Those who reach for the stars will do so from the Lone Star State.
Tell us about yourself.
Sure. Well, my name's Norman Garza Jr. I get to serve as the inaugural executive director of the newest state agency in the great state of Texas called the Texas Space Commission. Grew up in South Texas. During college and right afterwards, I knew I wanted to work in and around the Texas Capitol. Wasn't quite sure, what lane to swim in per se to begin with, but had some amazing opportunities. Start to get my feet wet with the policy side. Was able to work on appropriations, transportation, agriculture, natural resources issues. Eventually, that migrated into the higher ed world. And from there, the neat path was getting to space. But I like to start by reminding everybody I'm not an engineer and I actually have never been to space. So the privilege of serving in this capacity, I think, really stems from the experience at the Capitol of working within state government and then, of course, finding the partnerships at the federal level as well.
Yeah, you get to see the design of how the state works, right, in order to be able to help support its growth.
Sausage making is real.
Yeah,
no doubt.
I have to be honest with you. So I was usually starting with the joke, and I'm not a comedian, so I went to GPT. And so the Claude wanted me to ask you, in this space industry, what everyone's dying to know is where are the aliens going to land and where are they going to go into the customs? Is it DFW? Is it Houston?
Fair. Yeah.
Because there's so much space activity going on in the state.
Thankfully, there is. Answer the question. I haven't received that briefing yet. But, there's a lot of wide open spaces in West Texas, so they might choose to go there at some point. But I think to your point, there are pockets across the state of Texas. The entire Lone Star State has the opportunity to really dig in and participate in this burgeoning economy. Of course, we have the legacy of Johnson Space Center in the Houston area to fall back on, but there were also some decisions made by some really globally recognizable brands over the past several years that even before the Space Commission existed, they chose the Lone Star State to set up their operations. Down in South Texas, out in far West Texas, of course, we've had the big primes on an aerospace front up in the DFW area and a lot of startups in and around the Johnson Space Center. The I-35 corridor has really become a nexus, if you will, or a hotspot, heat map location when it comes to things like satellite manufacturing and lander productions, logistics, et cetera. So it might not be where the rockets are actually launching from or returning to, but the action is definitely real.
It's everywhere. I've been back home in Texas about 4 years, and just to see from El Paso, both government and commercial in that area in West Texas, even Midland's done a lot.
That's a good point. I remind everybody, there are 5 FAA designated spaceports in Texas. 2 of them are public spaceports, 3 of them are private spaceports, and Midland is one of the 2 public ones. Midland and Ellington Field down in Houston, not far from Johnson Space Center. Those are the 2 FAA designated public spaceports in Texas. The 3 privates is in Culberson County, outside of Van Horn, where Blue Origin operates, in Cameron County, outside of Brownsville at Boca Chica Beach, where SpaceX operates, and then in McGregor, Central Texas, as well, a SpaceX test site for the rocket engines themselves. So Texas is unique in that we have multiple and both classifications, both private and public, but you're right. Midland even has had a Spaceport Development Corporation for a number of years, which is different than just the local economic development corporations that most communities have stood up. One of the most recent new Spaceport Development Corporations that was established was right here in Central Texas. And I like to tell folks that while I might not be an expert at all of the opportunities that a Spaceport Development Corporation provides a community, I got to believe that it at least helps with marketing, and it sends the smoke signal across the industry for companies, whether they're the ones that have been around for a while or the ones that are just starting to get stood up, and they're considering where should they go. Where should they locate their operations? Well, if a community happens to go through the formal process of saying we would like to create a spaceport development corporation, I don't know that there's any stronger and formal signal to send to industry than come to my backyard and let's talk about what you might want to do when it comes to the space economy.
That's unique about Texas is that the state itself has allowed everyone within to kind of fight and compete for those opportunities.
Yeah, I like to use the word positioning. Our board chair, Gwen Griffin, she's a communicator appointed by the governor and serves as the chair. She uses the term competimates.
Competimates, that's a great one.
Whether you're talking intrastate or across state lines, there's no reason why we all can't be rowing in the same direction here. This is a perfect example of whole of government, whole of industry, all of the American patriotism across the globe to bring to fruition some real opportunities that is dual use at the same time of our daily way of life being protected, whether it's using technology like what's here in this room or knowing that our warfighters have the right kinds of capability to ensure that we get to live our daily life the way we like to live here in Texas and America.
Defense. So my last assignment, the guy that replaced me was a special forces officer on the ground.
Okay.
When he left that assignment, where did he go? He went into Colorado into a space job.
Okay.
So space touches everything.
No doubt.
From out and up and
That's
down
right.
too, right? I mean, it's,
we're fortunate also. One of our board members, her name is Dr. Heather Wilson. She's currently the president of the University of Texas at El Paso.
Go Miners.
Go Miners. Former member of Congress from New Mexico. Air Force Academy grad, and also the former Secretary of the Air Force.
That's right.
And she was the Secretary of the Air Force during the first Trump administration when the president created the Space Force. Right. So to your point of options for veterans now and the direction that the country is going to ensure that those resources are available when it comes to this new branch of our military armed services, it's great for both active duty, but also to your point of somebody punching out and part of the veteran community and identifying employment opportunities at space companies, whether it's in Colorado or Texas or elsewhere, it's real. And one of the things that we're learning is that these companies, whether they've been around for a while or they're just getting started, they do want to recruit folks with military background, but also folks that perhaps didn't serve in uniform, but they do want to serve their country and are able to work on some federal contracts. And they need, just like men and women in the uniform have different levels of security clearance. Well, in the private sector, these companies also hire folks that are capable of getting different levels of security clearance to work on these projects that ultimately the customer is some part of the U.S. government. And so we like to also describe what we're hearing as a demand signal from the industry when it comes to workforce. It's not just that they're a subject matter expert in a certain field, if you will, but that they're also capable of holding a clearance so that they can be in the room and listen to what the needs are and participate in the conversations to identify solutions that might come from the commercial sector for the government at the end of the day.
Yeah, the military is the best. And Texas is probably the #1 state for veterans and support of veterans here.
It's not bragging if it's the truth. And we continue with the support of Governor Abbott and the legislature to move the needle every 2 years when our legislature meets of passing more and more veteran-friendly bills so that the code reflects an environment and a landscape that hopefully really is a benefit to those men and women at the end of the day.
Can we talk about the allocation of the grants?
Sure.
I was looking last night at you've awarded, I think, 24, excuse me,
Yep.
24. out of the 150, and there was a bit of a diverse background of those that were selected. El Paso kind of won out in the end.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if you could give some insights into that and what was the thought process into the allocation of those grants?
Sure. So I'll start with a little history. So let's back up to 2024. 2024, I was hired in July. After the board was appointed in March, there was a big press conference at Johnson Space Center when the governor announced the appointees to our governing board of directors and our advisory consortium. These are 2 groups of 9. For our governing body, we have 3 appointed by the governor, 3 appointed by the lieutenant governor, and 3 appointed by the House Speaker. These are the evaluators of those proposals that came in to allocate the full $150 million that was appropriated in 2023.
And I was looking at their backgrounds. I mean, it's a very unique group. I mean, these are number one experts.
Subject matter experts.
They've started from a startup background. That's right. And they've come from corporate. So it's a great group to be
DC,
selected.
Texas, no doubt. They have unique experiences and expertise. There is no lack of ideas from them. Their minds run 24/7, 7 days a week, if you will. And so it's great to talk to them about all the things that they have line of sight on. And then I have to sometimes be the bad guy or be the helper along the way to say, that sounds good, but this is what currently Texas law allows us to do. So how do we fit that into this? And this is the process that we have to follow. You know, we had to adopt rules back in 2024.
Wait, what's this? Stop.
A little bit of state bureaucracy. I told you I've worked in and around the Capitol, but in order to best deploy the capital of $150 million, you know, we had to set up all of the processes correctly. And so in 2024, it took about 4.5 months. We drafted rules, sent it over to the Secretary of State's office. It's printed in the Texas Register for the general public to have line of sight, and they can comment and submit questions that we have to respond to everything that comes in. So, I mean, this is an open process, and ultimately we were able to open an application process. The application, I believe, was open for 4 months. Within that 4-month time frame, we received 280 applications from 140 unique entities, and combined, all of those project proposals totaled $3.4 billion. Wow. And we had $150 million to work with.
Oh my gosh, that's difficult.
Yeah, so the demand signal was certainly quickly realized. Many entities proposed more than one project, which was permitted. And many projects came from various faculty at multiple institutions of higher education around the state of Texas. And so it's great to know that our faculty researchers and the students that they're teaching are thinking about some really big ideas. And fortunately, with the experience and expertise on our board, they were able to really kind of look at the landscape and identify what could rise to the top sooner rather than later in order to really help drive the ball now. There are certainly important topics, but there are ways to phase out the deployment of capital. And so there were certain things that the board thought, well, that could maybe wait for a year or two. These things really should be underway sooner rather than later. And because they were taking some quick action in 2025, while the legislature was in session, they were spending down that 150 that was appropriated previously. The governor and the legislature recognized the strong work that was underway. And so they doubled down. In 2025, the legislature appropriated an additional $300 million. And so while we have already fully committed the 150, we're now beginning the process of updating the rules, reprioritizing the process in order to deploy that $300 million before the end of this year, or at least begin the process before the end of this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're busy.
Very busy. It's a lot of fun to work alongside not just those 9 who are on our governing body, but we also have 9 more that are on our non-governing advisory consortium executive committee. 2 are appointed by the governor, 2 by the lieutenant governor, 2 by the House Speaker, a designee of the UT System Chancellor's Office, a designee of the A&M System Chancellor's Office, and a designee from the president's office as well, Rice University. And they too have incredible backgrounds, former astronauts, roboticists, certainly on the veteran side, definitely on the CEO side as well. So all of that is what makes the role that I get to serve in exciting. But you were telling me before we started here, it's almost like running a startup, but it's state government.
You're a venture capitalist in that way. So you're running a government fund.
For better or worse, yes. Right. And that's the exciting part, but it's also making sure that we do it under the right methodologies. And I'll never forget when we went to a couple of conferences and folks from other states were quickly making the comparison of what it is that they can and can't do versus what we can and can't do. And you always have strengths and weaknesses when you start to play the analysis game of compare and contrast. We don't own property that we can try to help recruit people to come and set up like other states do. Other states, like Florida, as an example, actually control certain swaths of dirt, and they're able to have that conversation with companies about why they should decide to operate there. That's not what we have.
More true economic development in the way we've got
exactly
come land here.
And so we have hard cash that we're able to put up through the process. And places like a Colorado or a California or an Alabama, they don't have that hard cash, but they can certainly play the long game through the incentive packages or tax abatements and credits and all that good stuff. So, there's always certain things that they want from us and that we'd like to have from them. It's identifying the best practices at the end of the day. But to your point of what we're doing here, I love that other states are paying attention to this. I love that NASA knows that we are underway. I love that we're having conversations with top brass of the Space Force. And what the legislature enacted in 2025 through legislation was the authority for the Texas Space Commission Board of Directors to enter into an interagency agreement with a federal entity, specifically NASA or the Department of Defense. That's unique for a state agency to have that authority. It is dependent upon final approval from the governor himself when a state agency, transacts business at the federal level. Universities do this often, but for a state agency like the Texas Space Commission to do this, it's a unique authority that the legislature wanted to make sure was on the books so that folks like NASA and DOD or Space Force specifically understood that they were serious. The legislature was serious in terms of what they were empowering this gogoverning body, the board of directors,
very serious
to do.
To know that you have that state level support coming in, that's amazing.
And I'm just glad that we everywhere we go, we hear, or every Zoom I'm on or something, people are making comments about it, and we're working to execute on options that new statutory authority enables, and hopefully those are some wins before the end of this year as well that we can talk about.
So when's the next batch coming in and open? I mean, is there a timeline that people should be watching for?
Everybody's asking that. It's literally the $300 million question for the Texas Space Commission right now. I like to remind everybody that—
This is the time for you to plug that website too.
Good job. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah. So I do think, to your point, that we have the coolest domain in all of state government, space.texas.gov. Folks can sign up for our e-newsletter where we distribute on a quarterly basis information, and that certainly is going to be the location for folks to understand or learn about what the process is when we are able to unveil that here, hopefully in the next couple of months, definitely before the end of this calendar year, for something like what the next round of applications will call for. Right. We have to do everything in an open meeting. This is a transparent state agency operation. So folks will be able to hear, if they tune into future open meetings of the board of directors, the direction that they want to go before you have to worry about looking at an e-newsletter or reading a press release, because they're going to talk about it in an open meeting.
Wow.
We don't, last year, we were on a almost monthly cadence of board meetings. This year we've held one so far in February. It was our first board meeting on the road up in Dallas. The board convened during the Space Foundation's Finance Forum that was held up in Dallas. That was a strategic decision because of the Texas Stock Exchange being headquartered in Dallas. The mantra is Y'all Street instead of Wall Street. But the board met there in February. That's when they fully committed the original 150 through the most recent action. And they also did report outs. Last fall, our board chair created 5 working groups. And those working groups was a blend between our board of directors and our advisory consortium members. We have to do everything in groups of 3 for the board of directors to avoid an Open Meetings Act violation of a quorum. So it's usually 2 or 3 experts from the board of directors and a couple of experts from the advisory consortium to help brainstorm through certain topics. And to your question of, when should folks be ready to submit for potential future funds out of the $300 million? When the board chair created these 5 working groups last fall and tasked them to take action over the holiday break, they did a report out in February. And if I were sitting on the other side of the table anticipating where the board's direction was going to go, I would use these 5 working groups and the report outs that they did in an open meeting that's available through video footage on our website as a roadmap. Those great. 5 areas is lunar surface operations, low Earth orbit, workforce development, launch and re-entry capabilities, and national security. So out of those 5, 4 of the 5 did a public report out at that last board meeting. We have statutory authority to have a closed meeting when it comes to national security conversations. So that work group did not do a report out publicly. But the other 4 did. And, it was 3 to 7, 8 minutes worth of report outs from 4 working groups. And if I were trying to figure out, where the direction is, I'd go and listen in to that conversation. Now that's not binding, but it's certainly
it's a signal,
a peek behind
it's a demand signal,
peek behind the curtain, no doubt. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Norman, you were here at we were hosting some Australians with a former DOD executive here, and I love the first thing that you said, or maybe it was the last thing where you said, hey, Texas is always known with the space. In fact, it's the first word out of a famous movie sentence, right? It was like Houston.
That's right.
So when you think of Houston, that is kind of the landing zone for space. And now we're seeing it spread out. But back to the international community, right? I mean, when we go up in space, we've seen the international partnerships really flourish. And it is an opportunity for that collective innovation activity or investment opportunity from the international standpoint. Is the Space Commission thinking about partnerships or attracting those type of other space industries or space players to Texas?
Good question. We're interested in learning from anybody, whether they're in Austin, Texas, or they're halfway around the world in terms of what they'd like to do from Texas off this planet. But I'll make the reminder, when the governor and the legislature started to figure out why it was a need to establish something like a new state agency, they, first of all, didn't really quite know what to call it. The running joke was, there's got to be one person that can write 1 page of all of the things regarding commercial space underway in Texas, right? And of course, that answer was, well, it's not going to fit on 1 piece of paper, and it's probably going to require more than 1 person. And so through that exercise, we arrived at, let's call it a commission, let's create a board, let's have 9 people, let's empower them with some funding. And the funding was going to be a forcing function for a couple of things, ideally. Initially, it was to ensure that those companies that had already decided to set up shop here in Texas didn't leave, because we're learning every day that there's significant recruitment underway from other states to try to get more and more space-related companies.
Alabama, Florida,
Colorado, California,
right.
Washington, Virginia, you name it. The other opportunity that we identified early on was not just to help those companies stay here, but we also wanted to help them expand their existing footprint as well. Now, a reminder, in order to receive funds from the Texas Space Commission, an entity has to have an existing presence in Texas. So your question, this is a long answer about international, our fund is not set up to help bring companies to Texas from another state, much less another country.
Right.
However, if a byproduct of our activity is that folks learn in order to receive funds from us or apply, they have to come on their own, then that's great because it just brings people in, right? But I guess the real point I'm trying to make to answer your question is we definitely want to learn and listen when it comes to the international partnership opportunities. But the main focus is those companies that are here in Texas. We don't want them to leave. We want to help them expand their existing footprint. And then the byproduct could be a benefit if more companies on their own decide to come here from another state or another country.
Or partnerships with a local Texas company as well.
To your point of the Aussies who were here, I learned that many of them are already doing business with through partnerships with folks that are here in Texas, whether it's a private sector entity or a university or a local government as an example. So I think there's always room for, learning new opportunities for international partners to come to Texas.
Workforces, wouldn't say it's in an emergency category, but if Texas is talking about being a manufacturing mecca, workforce is it here?
That's right.
And now when we layer in the space domain, what actively are you seeing as far as the workforce development in those sectors?
Sure.
Are they coming out of universities? Are we retraining veterans? Are there programs out there that you're seeing in the application process?
Sure. So first of all, I'll be frank. Every university in Texas wants to take a bite at the apple when it comes to workforce development for the space economy, whether it's through the degree granting process, whether it's through the training and certificate models, and then also helping to go out and find those high school dropouts that might now be interested in coming back and finishing their diploma at a high school level, but also getting some kind of a CTE training at the same time or certificate at the end of the day, and making themselves eligible for consideration when it comes to these different companies. They need everything from truckers to maintenance operators to the PhD level of researchers. Also, you said it at the beginning, grew up in a rural community in South Texas. My welding skills are not the same welding skills that these companies need when it comes to trying to find the right folks to put these advanced materials together from a stainless steel durability standpoint. But workforce development, everything from K through 12, post high school, non-collegiate level to the collegiate level. The irony is, what I haven't been able to put my finger on the pulse is companies saying, at this point in time, I'm going to need this many of these kinds of employees for those sorts of projects.
Right.
Exactly. That outlook, that future modeling, forecasting, to your point. And, a lot of that is dependent on the capital flow that these companies are getting, whether it's from the private sector or through government contracts. So I understand that fluctuation is hard to then allow them to forecast accordingly, but then that also makes it difficult to reverse engineer the right kinds of workforce training programs that need to be funded or supported, whether it's from the state or the local community or internal funds through donors that maybe any provider has access to, et cetera. And so I think what we really need is a better handle on that forecasting in order to really solve the workforce question, because there's no lack of opportunities of providers of said training.
Right.
It's just the curiosity of, okay, well, what happens afterwards? Where are they going to go work? What city in Texas do they need to live? Which companies do they need to apply with? At what time will their skill set be most valuable in South Texas versus Central Texas versus West Texas? And people are, trying to plan their life, families, all of the things that come along with where you decide to work really comes down to where you decide to live because of the kind of life and lifestyle that you're trying to make for yourself. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So that's the unique. And I don't think that that's only regarding the space industry, but I think it really is more prevalent right now than other industry sectors like healthcare, or oil and gas, or other parts of manufacturing.
All which have a place in that.
That's right.
Area,
That's right.
In space.
No doubt.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I'll pivot just a little bit. While we have been blessed in Texas for creating not just the Texas Space Commission and having some resources available for funding, the legislature, in its wisdom and the support from the governor, has also created here in Texas several other innovative emerging technology programs. And they've funded those offices or those programs, if you will. The Semiconductor Chips Office within the governor's Economic Development and Tourism Department, the Nuclear Energy for a Power Source initiative that the legislature has funded. They have established but not yet fully stood up a quantum office. We have a robust cancer prevention research organization in the state of Texas. They recently created a dementia-specific research organization and funded it as well. And then at the end of the day, when you think about these kinds of experiments or research that can benefit us mere mortals that will never leave the ground, I'm learning more and more how the efficacy or the viability of certain research output is just higher in zero gravity. So just imagine the things that they've already done through, for example, the International Space Station or other projects that have been launched over the years. There's a real opportunity here for all of those worlds to collide, for lack of a better description, when it comes to the funds and the programs that the state of Texas has stood up. And I think that makes us an outlier for the rest of the country in a beneficial manner. If we mixed, the water resources, the energy resources, the semiconductor resources with in-space operations and such, whoever can kind of thread that needle best, if I had to guess, might be helping drive the ball. And maybe that's the direction that the board decides to go later. But that's just ancillary, because it's other actions that the legislature has taken over the last several sessions unrelated to the creation of the Texas Space Commission.
I know my last visit to Midland, they were looking at building a facility of some sort to be able to do more testing, space-related testing.
Sure.
To reduce some of the burden on the traditional ecosystems that do that testing, like NASA.
Sure.
Right? So to kind of help the commercial industry thrive in that way. So I see it not just being the companies themselves, but the infrastructure,
no doubt,
and the diversification of where space resides across the state. I think Texas is doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah, your example of Midland is excellent. As a reminder, AST Mobile, satellite manufacturer, very large production.
Yes.
Very large mass that is being manufactured out there, as an example. And that, I think, in part is because there is a Midland spaceport and a development corporation as well. And the talent, there's a lot of crossover between the oil and gas sector for different functions of the space economy. And so I think that's one example. And I'll expand by reminding your viewers that part of those 24 projects that the board approved through the original $150 million are going towards feasibility studies that local areas, local governmental organizations requested funds to do certain feasibility studies. And the city of Midland is one of those recipients. There's also what we call councils of government. So think multiple counties in a certain region of the state are combined or clustered. And so the board received proposals from several of the COGs out in West Texas for feasibility studies, and those are underway. We're anxious to read and see what those findings are at the end of their project timeframe. But it's to talk about things like maybe it's more infrastructure that's required. Maybe it's more recruiting of a satellite supply chain manufacturing processes. The other example I like to share that I've learned that actually the Space Commission had nothing to do with, but the city of Arlington, on their own, they decided to go and recruit certain space companies, and they did so by first using their own funds to construct a building on their airport and let it be able to have the retrofit process underway once they identified who the particular occupant would be. And at the end of the day, because they were proactive in that process, they recruited another satellite manufacturing company called eSpace to operate within that building that they paid for through a lease agreement that's on their airport. And you can imagine the kinds of hardware that these companies are manufacturing. They're kind of sensitive. They don't need to be on the roads very long. They might not need to be on a rail car for very long. They may or may not be able to sustain something like waterway transportation. But what if all you had to do was keep it all in a clean room, make sure it was packaged correctly, you had a very short distance to get on an airplane, and that package is taken to wherever it's going to be
for launch,
integrated into a payload for launch capacity. And so I like to brag on that foresight that the city of Arlington had as well to be a domino effect, and other communities around the state should take note. And,
big time.
And back to one of my original comments of positioning, one community positioning themselves more so than another when it comes to opportunities. It's not a competition. It's that competitive approach. And there are certain things that Central Texas would be more advantageous to any company over North Texas versus South Texas, et cetera.
It's kind of in the DNA of Texans, right? Where Texan goes, everyone else follows. The United States. I think the governor even had a pretty unique statement in that way.
Yeah, I think his quote specifically is, those who reach for the stars will do so from the Lone Star State.
Yeah, that's right. That's great. I know that's going to end up in a YouTube short. Look, is there anything that I should be asking you for the listeners to help maybe support or like how do we get behind this effort?
Yeah, great question. So also in the wisdom of the legislature, not only did they create the board like I mentioned, but that advisory consortium, that acronym is TARSEC, T-A-R-S-E-C, the Texas Aerospace Research and Space Economy Consortium, TARSEC. Their website is tarsec.space. So not only do we have the appointees of that executive committee from the consortia, every institution of higher education in Texas per statute is eligible to designate a local campus liaison. And so we've helped to enable that. But TARSEC, they've also created a membership application free of charge for anybody who wants to say, hey, I'm in Texas. I want to be part of the conversation. These are my areas of expertise.
This is where we can help, right?
This is where we can help. Call me when you need me. Well, I recommend folks go and fill out the membership application. I think that executive committee meets every month or every other month, and they review all of the applications that come in. And then they use that membership to begin organizing topics for workshops. They held, I think, about 4 in 2025. I know that they are planning the first one perhaps for the summertime in 2026. But I encourage folks to go to tarsec.space, consider applying to be a member, and then participating in the conversation that way. There's only certain conversations or engagements that board members can have because they are the governing body of this agency and they have oversight of the fund. And we have a very robust conflict of interest process.
Yes.
So
you want to protect that.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
But the consortium and TARSEC is that neutral ground for those conversations to take place. And so to your point, whether they're an international viewer or someone around the state or elsewhere in the country, certainly go there, and that's how you can help be part of the conversation with us.
We didn't mention anything about San Antonio. I know that there's going to be an inaugural space
summit.
Event, a summit, thank
yes,
you,
sir.
Here in the coming days. Can you talk about that?
Sure, yeah. So this is something that the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce leadership decided on their own to organize. And I think they made some observations of other summits or conferences, major industry networking opportunities that have been underway in different parts of the country for many years. And they said, why not have one here in Texas as well? They stood up to the plate and they have kicked off their planning process. It's in September. I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but Google San Antonio Chamber of Commerce.
It's easy. It's like the first one that rises to the top, right?
Space Summit, exactly. And here's what I've learned. There are places like within the LA area or El Segundo in particular, where there's been a lot of space companies, kind of like probably why the company you referenced earlier decided to go there and leave Texas. But they have a pretty robust supply chain conference every year. And of course, that's where all these companies can go and learn how they can obtain or attain what they need in order to do whatever it is that they're doing.
Right.
And so I think the SA Chamber realized that that certainly is beneficial from driving business, economic development standpoint, solidifying supply chain, and then just building a community. And so they stepped up to the plate. I think they secured the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center. I think it's, several days long, and they're working on building out a very robust speaker series, panels. I've encouraged them to, partner with TARSEC to maybe have certain conversations during that schedule as well. And who knows, maybe the board chair will be interested in holding a second roadshow meeting of the board of directors for the Texas Space Commission in San Antonio, like we did in Dallas earlier this year. Hasn't been decided by any means, but I'm impressed that community and those leaders have identified what role and what position they can have on the field here when it comes to the space economy in Texas. And San Antonio, it's kind of the crossroads, always has been geographically, multiple interstates, proximity to a lot of aerospace activity in the Oklahoma side, New Mexico, the Mexican side, of course, Louisiana. So, I'm impressed with their planning process.
And, I think in a previous podcast I heard, San Antonio has cyber. Somebody mentioned cyber in space. Yes, that's a thing.
That's a thing. And that's another topic I should brag about. The legislature last session, with support from the governor, established the Texas Cyber Command. Mm-hmm. It's in San Antonio. I don't think that is ironic. The 16th Air Force at Joint Base San Antonio is there. University of Texas at San Antonio has really planted their flag on the cybersecurity technology area. There's also a cyber and space nexus as well.
I'm hoping everybody hears the theme that Texas is a proving ground, right? And we prove things out faster than anyone else. And it is a state that wants people to be successful, and that's why we have these commissions. And we're following where these industry trends are going to help support those efforts as a continuum.
Industry trends is the right phrase, and thank you for calling that out. Not only will I say that there's been wisdom from the legislature and support from the governor, but the local communities that really enable this, as well as the experts that are willing to serve on these boards through the appointment process. We couldn't do it if it weren't for those Texans with those unique backgrounds to really make sure that
wanting to give back to Texas in that
going in the right direction.
Exactly right.
That's right. Yep.
The higher call to service.
Sure.
Are you interested in the new advancements of technology, in those applicants that you saw, was there anything exquisite that stood out for you? Like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that, or we're not seeing that. Where is innovation going when it comes to space?
That's a great question.
Are you picking up on those patterns?
2 comments first out of the chute. One, I'm not an evaluator, and 2, we have a legal veil of confidentiality, if you will, through the process of these applications because of competitive interest in particular. But to your point, there are a lot of conversations that are being held outside of the application process that people are not trying to keep quiet. Maybe they did or didn't submit an application to us, but at the end of the day, it's examples of things that can be done even without humans in zero gravity through the experiment research process that hopefully gets proven out and comes back as a benefit to the rest of us for something that we don't even know we're going to need on a daily basis yet. But that innovation really is the curious minds of some really smart folks that happen to be here in Texas that are able, willing, and ready to figure it out. It's still that kind of pioneering spirit that I'm observing from these different Texans across the state who are recommending projects be funded. Now, there's other sources of funds here in Texas for those projects to come to fruition other than the Texas Space Commission.
Right. Doesn't reside there.
So a lot of times, when folks are talking about something like, well, maybe you should talk to the CHIPS office, maybe you should talk to the nuclear office, maybe you should talk to this university, maybe you should talk to that organization or this philanthropist, et cetera. So that's been fun to kind of play dot connector along the way as well.
You've done an exceptional job in standing this up. You're really a founding CEO in that way. You've already deployed some capital that's really, you're going to find out where the needs are.
Hopefully soon.
Assessment.
Yes, thank you.
And already it sounds like you're getting the next tranche of
the momentum is
funding's coming.
That's right.
And probably even more so behind that. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I know the state is proud of you and the entire team.
Yeah, I was going to say it takes team effort and a strong leadership of the board. So
definitely
it's been fun.
Are seeing the right caliber of folks, participate in this commission.
Thank you. Thanks for the observation.
Trying. And in the movies, they usually assign a call sign to that person that's either leading the mission or a part of that team, to your point.
Yeah.
So normally you don't get to pick your call sign, but I will give you that opportunity.
Well, I might be oversharing, and certainly I'm not the best when it comes to the creative mindset. So I'd love if anybody is going to eventually create one. I've been called worse than just my name, but I am a junior, and so sometimes I have to, in parts of the state, I have to actually say Norman Jr., not just Norman. But my whole family calls me Weddle. I learned how to spell that before my own name. So, I don't know if that really counts, but it's certainly something personal.
It does. No, we have somebody before calling themselves Triple Helix, and we've heard somebody calling them Snoopy. Somebody went on a F-16 and ended up throwing up, and he wanted it to be called Pukey. It's so it's great. It's got to be something that's heartfelt for you. Upcoming schedule. I'm sure you have a lot on there, but is there something interesting that the audience should know about?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. Our engagement calendar is quite robust all across the state. But one that I'd like to highlight in particular is just up the road from here in Austin at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. In a few weeks, there's going to be an organization. The organization is Endless Frontiers Institute. They are hosting what's called the Space Demand Signal Forum. There have been similar events, one held here in Austin not too long ago, and it was a Navy demand signal forum. So Baylor is fortunate to have amongst its alum General Purdy, and he is a Space Force general within the SecAf's office currently. And so he is going to bring a lot of program managers to Texas for a conversation when it comes to space acquisition. It'll be in mid-May at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. So I encourage everybody to look up that event. They have invited several board members of the Texas Space Commission and our TARSEC executive members as well. They've invited State Representative Greg Bonin, MD, chairman of the Texas House Appropriations Committee. author of the legislation that created the Texas Space Commission to be on a panel. And so I expect there to hopefully be a lot of Texans that show up, especially those that are already doing business with the federal government, particularly through the IDIQ related to Golden Dome. But there's many other opportunities, of course, as well when it comes to the Space Force. So few weeks, Baylor, Texas, or Baylor University, Waco, Texas.
That's okay. No, that's an important, we've seen these demand signals. One is actually being held this week in Silicon Valley for the Army.
Okay.
Like you said, the
Perfect.
Navy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally where former PMs like myself signal to industry exactly what they're looking for and the timeline for
That's right.
it. So for small businesses, Texas businesses, this is an opportunity to go interface with who needs the capability.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for that call out.
Certainly.
You are on a mission, and we're very supportive of that mission. And
thanks for everything that Q Branch is doing and the whole community here in Austin and Central Texas and a lot of those that are around the country and around the world that y'all are bringing in to an interface with us as well. So thank you.